Hi, I'm Gary Lee Joyner, and this is session 4 in my Atomic Guitar series. I hope you've gotten the idea by now that this is a different sort of a series than you might be expecting. We've talked about some general musical ideas, and in session 2 we talked about playing some symmetrical scales on one string, and we chose string 1, and talked about ideas about patterns and creating a sense of home in a scale that doesn't have a sense of home or a center of gravity built into it. So today we're going to go a little further with this idea of scales on one string. I want to finish out a couple of thoughts. And what we're going to do first is not play a full scale up the octave up to the 12th fret that we were doing before, but we're only going to play 4 notes. And they are going to be, for purposes of demonstration, the open first string, the 2nd fret on the 1st string, the 4th fret on the 1st string, and the 5th fret. So guitar vocabulary would be, we're skipping 2 frets from open to the 2nd fret, then 2 frets, and then 1 fret. 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. That's the pattern we're playing. In music terminology, it's a whole step, and then another whole step, and then a half step. In other music terminology, it would be a major second, and a minor second. All of them are describing that combination of sound, reminding ourselves that sound is always the ultimate goal of everything we're doing. So be listening to what you're playing. And a way to help you do that is to start improvising as we were talking before, but now just on these 4 notes, playing melodies. And you could play around with the ideas we used about creating a center of gravity or a sense of home. Also listen to see now in this not a symmetrical pattern, does any note on its own by its very nature stand out as sounding like home to you? That's just a question to think about as you're pursuing that. Now, if we were in one of my workshops right now, I would have you spend a little time. We would split up and I'd have you just play around with improvising, making melodies, listening, thinking about, seeing what sort of things happen as you start to play with those 4 notes. And way more things happen than what I might demonstrate, because you'll be bringing your own sensibility and sensitivity to it. After a while, we'd come back together and then split up into pairs. And I hope that you can do this with, if you have a friend who's a guitarist, you could record yourself in whatever way is available, with your video or just audio or whatever. Not as good as working with another person, so that would really be best. And what you do is you sit, stand, however you like to play, facing each other, and take turns playing, I would say at the beginning, 2 or 3 notes, tops. Could be less. Could be 1 note. But one person plays 2 or 3 notes, the other person listens and watches and plays those exact same notes. We're only using 4 notes right now, so it's not that daunting. But there's plenty going on, plenty to listen to. How did the person pick the note? Was a certain note louder than another note? What was the order of notes? Were there repeated notes? All these things your brain is processing as you play back these 2 or 3 notes. Very simple. Now, a couple things to think about when you're doing this. Please, by all means, do not try to impress your partner or yourself with your cleverness or your creativity. That is a sure killer of useful thoughts. Don't try to be interesting. Just make some sounds and listen to them. Follow your ear, you know, if a certain direction seems to be where you're going to go next. That's fine. Just don't try to be clever. Now, another way to do this is to not look at the other person. Make yourself do it only with your ear. It's useful to watch the other person and pick up what they're doing that way, but also turn away and see if you can mimic each other just by hearing what they do. And by doing this, I like to call it an activity. It's an exercise, but it's an activity. You're focusing on something that unbelievably musicians, some never learn to do, and that's to listen. You're listening to yourself and what you're playing, and you're listening to the person you're playing with. It seems so self-evident that it wouldn't be necessary to mention that, but it's startling how many people don't even listen truly to what they're playing themselves, much less to the people they're playing with. Now, another way to do this is to not try to duplicate exactly what the person played, but to play something a little different that somehow either responds to what they played or mimics what they played in some sense, maybe the flow, the direction, the volume, some aspect of the way it felt. That's also a very valid and useful thing to do. So try all of those, and try it repeatedly, because as I said before, you're going to find different things every time you come back to this. That's a very, very useful activity that I highly recommend you try. Now, moving on right now, I wish we had a chance for us to do that before we go on, but maybe you'll stop the video and do this and come back. But I want to talk a little bit more about these 4 notes. And what we're going to do first is play the same pattern, which was 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, whole, whole, half. But instead of starting on the open string, we're going to start at the 7th fret. So the 7th fret, a whole step or 2 frets would be the 9th fret. 2 more frets, a whole step, would be the 11th fret, and a half step is the 12th fret. And do the same thing there that we were talking about before. Improvise alone with somebody else, but just play. It's exactly the same structure, but starting on a different note. The 4 notes that we're playing in each case, that group is called a tetrachord. Tetra, 4 notes. Now, the interesting thing about this is that those 2 identical tetrachords, if you play them in a row together, it's a major scale. Do, re, mi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They get referred to in all these ways. More vocabulary that can be used. You can think in terms of second open, 2nd fret, 4th fret, 5th, 7, 9, 11, 12. We're playing a group of notes that ends when it hits the same note we started with at the octave, which we talked about before. And that is a major scale. I find that to be a very useful bit of information, because instead of trying to learn, let's see now, a major scale is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and all of that, you just remember that it's 2 tetrachords, 2 identical tetrachords, whole, whole, half, and they're separated by a whole step. Now the note, we haven't talked about this before, but if you know from tuning, that open string is an E note. So when we're playing this major scale, those two tetrachords, starting and ending on an E note, it is, yes, an E major scale. That's the musical vocabulary for what we're playing. And of course, it goes back down as well. You won't play with this for very long before it occurs to you that, hold it, if there are two identical tetrachords, couldn't the top one be the bottom of another major scale? And the answer is absolutely yes. So if you played that one and then skipped 2 frets, a whole step, and played another one, you've got another major scale. This one is starting and ending on, it happens to be a B note. The 7th fret on the first string in standard tuning is a B note. So that's a B major scale. The B major scale and the E major scale share a tetrachord. So really, they're very closely related. They are also next to each other on the circle of fifths, and that's why they are. The circle of fifths, people are always asking me about that, and with some confusion in their eyes when they're asking. And the circle of fifths is hugely useful in just profound ways to be aware of and to think about. But for starters, to just know that the reason it works is every scale of next to each other in the circle of fifths shares a tetrachord. That's a useful little thing to put away in your brain. Now, before we quit today, I want to cover one more thing. We have been playing a one-stringed instrument, but we have the potential here of a multi-stringed instrument. So let's go back to thinking of this as one 6-stringed instrument instead of 6 one-stringed instruments. And something unique, not unique about guitar, because that would mean that it's the only one that does this, but singular about guitar, it shares this with some other stringed instruments like violin. The exact same note can occur in more than one spot. That open E note is at the 5th fret, it's also at the 9th fret, it's also on the, I'm moving one string over, so 5th fret on string 2, 9th on string 3, 14th on string 4, and 19th on string 5. Same exact note. Not an octave, the same note. It's part of what makes us a little crazy on the guitar when we're trying to learn scales. But we can take that fact and make it easier to comprehend instead of harder to comprehend if we are aware and remember that, okay, if we started on the open string, we can start that same tetrachord on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, play 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, play that tetrachord there, and then play the original 2nd tetrachord, and suddenly you're playing a major scale on 2 strings. And we're really not stressing our brain to do that. Now remember when I talked about tuning in session 2 and how important that is to the whole structure of the guitar in standard tuning, our little pattern. We talked about that in session 1. We're making use of that. Any note on the next string over 5 frets up, we know because we tuned it that way, we're the ones who made it this way, it's going to be the same note. So that's why it's right there available to us. Of course, between strings 2 and 3, it's only going to be 4 frets away because we tuned that one string differently. So if we're playing a tetrachord on string 2, and this is a major tetrachord, by the way, the one that we're working with today, 4 frets up on the next string over, exactly the same tetrachord. And then when you start realizing, okay, I can take the bottom one of that, play those 3 the same, 5 frets up on the next string is going to be the note I started that tetrachord with on the 3rd string. So I can play that one on the next string and play the original 2. And as you've played this is why we spend time improvising with that tetrachord, so you just get this thing built into your brain. And you start realizing, oh, I'm just playing part of the tetrachord here and part on one string over. Suddenly the whole way that scales move across the guitar and lay across the guitar, it's not so complicated. It's just those tetrachords spread out using the tuning principle to grab some notes over on a different string. So I think we'll stop there today and encourage you to spend time playing with this. Try the tetrachords on various strings. If you do know the names of notes, even on the open strings, you can start identifying some things musically as you're playing them. I'll leave that up to you. It's really not the point of what we're talking about right now. Very useful to be able to do that, but for now we're just mostly concerned with how the guitar mechanism works with these ideas. So that's a way to approach a major scale starting with one string. And we've got the symmetrical scales we talked about before. You can apply this same idea, splitting the symmetrical scales onto 2 strings, deciding where you want to break it up to start in the next string over, find the note 5 frets up and play part of the scale there, and then pick up what you were already working with on the previous string. And you'll start seeing how the patterns that you've probably seen in books for scales, where they start developing across the neck, but you're coming at it from this totally different direction. The next time we're going to go in a different direction and talk about some other concepts that I think will open up some doors for you. I hope so. If we were in a workshop, we would spend more time with details on each of these things we've talked about, but I think I've given a concise sort of explanation of what this approach is about. And I'll have at the end of this video contact information if you're interested in having me do workshops in your area. Please get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much.